I'm a soil and catchment scientist based at Lancaster University. My research is focused on the sustainable use of phosphorus in food systems, understanding how phosphorus moves from land into water and what the avenues for mitigation might be. As Nigel has said, phosphorus is a key nutrient affecting ecological response in our waterways, and we need to understand where it's coming from. And I think at the outset, we need to acknowledge that it's a very, very complex story. We have leakage of phosphorus from a number of different sources and along a number of different pathways. We have wastewater inputs from sewage works, we have surface runoff from agricultural land, we have erosion, we have losses following fresh applications of fertilizers and manures to the land surface, we have drainage losses, and pipes. There's pipes everywhere. Wherever you look, there's a pipe that goes into the river or the lake. So it's a highly variable situation. And what it means is that the phosphorus entering the waterways is coming from different places, it's coming at different times, and it's coming in a spectrum of different forms, from highly soluble to particulate. And some of it's coming continuously, as in from sewage works, but most of it is driven by rainfall and runoff, so it's intermittent. On top of all that complexity, once it gets into the river, it's subject to a whole range of biological, chemical, and physical processes which further retain or release phosphorus in the waterway. So that's adding yet another layer of complexity to what we actually measure in the river, which means there's huge temporal and spatial variability. And as Nigel said, on top of that, we could actually add climate change. Climate change is another complicating factor in understanding what our river concentrations are. And I think this has a number of key consequences. The first is that it's unrealistic to expect to find a single cause and effect, at least at the catchment scale. And that means that combined actions are necessary from all the sectors emitting phosphorus into the river. And I think the second thing is that there needs to be a catchment response. Water quality is a catchment-based issue, and it needs to be a catchment-based response. So untangling this complexity is really difficult. One way we can start to think about phosphorus is how it's used within the catchments. And we can do this using a model which we call substance flow analysis. So this is just a mass balance model that quantifies the inputs, outputs, and internal flows of phosphorus in any system. In this case, it's a food system at the catchment scale. And it produces a really complicated diagram, but you can see that the boxes are where the stores are in the system for each of the sectors, and the arrows are the flows. And the width of the arrow is the size of the flow. And this is the River Wye, for example, in 2021. And we can see that most of the wide arrows are from the livestock sector. But apart from telling us where the phosphorus is in the catchment, it's also quite useful in terms of looking at metrics that we can use to understand how efficient and sustainable the phosphorus use is in the catchment. And the bottom line is that food systems are pretty inefficient. If you have a look at outputs as a function of inputs, they're very inefficient. And that leads to, in the agriculture sector, that leads to surpluses which accumulate in the soil. And in the wastewater sector, all the unrecovered P is discharged as effluent into the river. And if we add the agricultural surplus and the wastewater together, we have another metric I'm blinding you with the metrics here. It's called NAPI. Funny term. Net anthropogenic phosphorus input. So this represents all the unused P from all that inefficiency, all the unused P in the catchment, which is just building up in the landscape. And this substance flow analysis is just an annual year. So every single year, and we can go back when census records started, 150 years. And all that unused P is accumulating in the landscape. So that's a really important point, is that we have legacies. We have legacies from the past as well as inputs from the present. And the question is, which is more important to control? NAPI is important because it's a key factor influencing river P levels. So we can take the 9 regions of the UK here, and we can see that as the NAPI increases, the river load of phosphorus escaping from those regions increases as well in an exponential way. Wales, Wales is one of the regions is here. And we can see exactly the same relationship at the catchment scale. So these are catchments in southern England. We don't have any examples from Wales. But it's the same sort of relationship. And these relationships are really, really important, because if you have zero surplus, zero NAPI, i.e. if you had no wastewater discharges, no agricultural surplus, you would still have a legacy effect. It's the intercept on the y-axis. So that they're very, very useful graphs. But of course, it's not the only factor. The input pressures that we have from our agriculture are buffered by the landscape in which they're present. So the type of landscape and the way we manage our land and the way we manage our fertilizers and manures has a large impact on how much is lost. So it's not just the legacy P coming from the soil, it's the way we manage the land and the way we manage the inputs. And I think that's one of the problems that we've got at the moment, is that what's happening is that the current mitigation is that we're trying to stop the phosphorus from getting into the river by putting in buffer strips or making soils less erodible. We're not actually addressing the fundamental core of the problem, which is the surplus, it's the NAPI. And so I think the main message that I wanted to get across this morning is that you've got to reduce the phosphorus input pressure on your catchments, in addition to all the other things that farmers are being actioned upon.